Cy Hirsch comes out with this story. He's dismissed. It's dismissed as a conspiracy theory. And now what did we just find out?
The New York Times, along with a German paper, they come out with this. It's very vague. Seymour Hersh's reporting was very detailed, had a lot of information that could be checked up on, verified. A lot of leads. The New York Times, they publish an article saying that, quote, U.S. intelligence officials think that, quote, pro-Ukrainian groups might have been behind the sabotage. And, for this assessment, they cite intelligence reviewed by U.S. officials who remain anonymous. And they came out with this report, and this was the first time since Seymour Hersh's reporting that his reporting was acknowledged by his former paper. He used to work there, and they dismiss it. They say, well, Seymour Hersh alleges this, and they make it seem like he didn't have a source for this. They make it seem like he just made it up out of thin air. They say that he alleges based on earlier statements from the Biden administration. And then they say that, well, U.S. officials have denied it. They had 2 paragraphs on it. 2 paragraphs on it. But they reported that German intelligence had found evidence of a boat that may have been used to lay the explosives. They don't give any real details. They don't give any explanation. No one goes on the record. Remember, Seymour Hersh's reporting was widely dismissed on the grounds that it had a single anonymous source to go off of. Well, the New York Times doesn't seem to have a problem with that when the source says exactly what they want to say. When the source says that that it wasn't the U.S., when the source says that it actually might have been Ukraine. Now, the questions as to why the U.S. officials are blaming Ukraine for this, I mean, that's a complicated, difficult question. But I'll try to touch on it.
They're very quick to point out that Zelensky was not part of it. They keep saying
right.
They
said that Zelensky wasn't part of it, and there's no evidence that Zelensky or his top lieutenants knew anything about this attack. So I guess it was just some dudes.
Yeah.
Who some pro-Ukrainian dudes who just so happen to have thousands of pounds of explosives and knowledge of one of the most sensitive global infrastructure. I mean, it's dumb. It's dumb. Journalists, they're not. They might be dumb, but they're not stupid, right? They know what they're doing. A lot of them who are working on this piece, they almost certainly are aware of Seymour Hersh's credentials and his reporting on this topic. They know about the long U.S. opposition to the pipeline. They know about the threatening statements. They know that Tony Blinken called the destruction of the pipeline a tremendous opportunity. And they know that Victoria Nuland was also cheering it on. They know this, but they choose not to report it. Now, why? Why are they doing that? Why are they misleading the American people in a way that I can only assume is deliberate? If it's not deliberate, then they should be fired because they're not good at their jobs. They're not very smart. But they understand that all this evidence is out here, yet they choose to conceal it from their readers. And this is part of the whole war. The entire war has been in the background an information war, a war of narratives, of perception management to ensure that Western audiences don't get anything negative about Ukraine until it's just right. And now we were in a period where we have the joint chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staffs earlier or late last year called for maybe it's time to talk about negotiations. Biden and Schultz in Germany just met to talk about maybe what's the end game here. You have the Rand Corporation putting out a study saying that a long drawn-out war in Ukraine might not be in our best interest. So you have all of these signals that the U.S. establishment is at least signaling that they're looking at concluding this war. And then you see these reports about, Ukrainian troop fatigue. And then you see this report about the Nordstream Pipeline and how that might have been some pro-Ukrainian elements who were involved in it. And to me, it just seems like it's creating this climate where maybe this war is coming to an end, and maybe the people in Washington are, in a way, doing a soft launch of the end of this war. Now, this is all obviously speculation. I don't know what they're thinking. No one, we can't know what they're thinking. We can only look at the signals. We can only look at the information we have. But based on all that information, I mean, it does seem like they are throwing Ukraine under the bus. I mean, there are other reports about how the U.S. officials really don't have any clue what's going on the ground in Ukraine. They don't have any insight into the decision-making power in Ukraine, which I find difficult to believe when you consider that this entire war effort is really housed in Washington. I mean, they're providing intelligence, real-time intelligence for targeting, for troop movements, for artillery strikes. I mean, this is America's war. This is Washington's war, NATO's war.
I think it's so important for people to realize, like, this is not something you could easily pull off. Like, this required incredibly trained divers, was extremely expensive. The idea that a Ukrainian group would do it without Zelensky knowing is kind of hard to believe. And the idea that Zelensky would do anything without the United States permission is kind of hard to believe.
Yeah, right. Like, I mean, the tale that's being spun here, I mean, it like you said, it doesn't really pass the sniff test. I'm not saying it can't be true.
Yeah.
Weird things happen in the world, especially when wars are involved, and especially when information is very limited to the public, when decisions are being made and a lot of it's obscured behind state secrecy. It's the health of the state, secrecy. But I mean, given the geopolitical context, the statements from Biden and Newland, and given the expressed goals of all the parties involved, the U.S. did it theory is far more likely than Ukraine did it, or infinitely more likely than the Russia did it. But the key thing to understand is that the media pretends like it's not. The media pretends like, oh, well, it's just one big mystery and we could never figure it out. I mean, come on. Yeah. I mean, Seymour Hersh in his interviews, he's been doing a few, not by American mainstream press, mind you, but in European press, in alternative U.S. press. He did an interview with Mark Ames, where
early on,
where he said, I think Mark asked him, it was like, oh, Cy, how did you find this story? And Seymour Hersh is like, well, I mean, it was Biden said he was going to do it. He said that we will bring an end to this pipeline. It doesn't take a geopolitical expert. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that, hey, well, the U.S. might have had a motivation to act here. Maybe we should, as a serious press, report on it. No, it doesn't take a genius. It's easy to figure out. It's easy to point the fingers. But the media refuse to do it. And so that raises questions about how free is our press? And if they are free, are they serious? Are they a serious group of journalists? And when this came out, it's interesting. Only one journalist seemed to care about this in the White House press briefings, and that was Sam Husseini. He went to the press briefings, asked the State Department spokesperson, well, like, what about Seymour Hersh's reporting? Do you think that this is that your denials are credible given all of this evidence that points into the U.S. direction? And of course he said, yes, of course our denials are credible. We always follow the law. We would never do anything like this. But I mean, no other journalists seem to care. They're there. They have access to the same internet that you and I have access to. They have access to the same facts. They probably know all this stuff, but they choose to keep quiet. They choose not to say anything. They choose not to ask the tough questions of our State Department for whatever reason. I mean, you'd have to ask them, but I mean, they probably think they're on the right team. They probably think they're on Team America and that rocking the boat isn't good. They think that this is a war, an anti-fascist war that might determine the fate of the Western civilization. Some of them probably do believe that. And so they're not willing to ask the serious questions as required when you want to hold power accountable.